Happy Easter, everybody listening. It hasn't been a very good Saturday, Mr. Alistair Mackenzie, but I hope your Sunday Easter has been better than the day before.
Well, yeah, I mean, thankfully, from my perspective, I was at a wedding yesterday and therefore didn't have to sit through the 90 minutes against Chievo. But yeah, obviously, today has been a bit better because that was an absolutely devastating result, really, and it's really thrown everything into a bit of confusion and chaos for Lazio fans, really.
Yeah, it's really good to have sort of 24 hours to digest this unbelievable result. And Alistair, as I said yesterday, if Chievo would have played every time away against Lazio, they would probably have reached the Champions League. And I don't know if it's right, but I think Lazio is the only team this year who haven't beat Chievo because we drew away and we lost at home. This is simply unacceptable.
It is, yeah. No, it absolutely is. It's a real kind of turning point of a result, in a way. I mean, like you say, we've got a bad record against Chievo anyway. And as we were saying before we came on air, it's a bit of a relief that they have been relegated so that we don't have to do this again next season. But yeah, I mean, it's one thing having a poor run of results and, losing games against Spal, and drawing with Sassuolo and all of that. It's a totally different thing losing at home to a team who've won one game all season, who are already relegated, who are playing their youth players because they're just wanting to give people experience, who have been utterly hopeless basically this entire season. And all of that in the context of knowing that it was another opportunity to really make a big step in this Champions League race. But as we know, almost every opportunity Lazio have had in front of them this season to make a big move in that Champions League race, they've decided they're not bothered. And that's the thing that's the most frustrating, really.
Yes, I agree. And Fede Farco asked us on Twitter, do they want to qualify or not? Because it seems they don't, Lotito Dixit. I don't know if players don't want to qualify. I think they want. The problem is you have to want to win these tough matches when they're really important. And the impression is that these Lazio players doesn't have what it gets to win important matches.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real issue. We've talked a lot about the mentality of this team ever since we started doing this podcast, really, over about 2 years ago or whenever it was. And yeah, obviously a lot was made of that last season with the collapse in the Europa League against Salzburg and obviously the collapse against Inter on the final day. But I think obviously those were very dramatic moments where you could see this fragile mentality shining through. But I think it's just a problem throughout the season. You see it when Lazio go behind, that they very rarely make comeback wins after conceding a goal. You see it in the big games where if they go behind, their heads go down and they don't believe that they can get back into it. And you see it in high-pressure situations. And I would never, ever normally call a home game against this Chievo team a high-pressure situation. But obviously just the knowledge that it was a chance to make that move in the Champions League race was enough for them to collapse and lose their heads. And Milinkovic-Savic was probably the biggest example of that, to be honest, from his ridiculous red card.
Yeah, and the fact is, incredible is that every time it seems over and then Milan or other teams just give another opportunity to Lazio, who anyway find a way to miss it. I don't know how many people would expect Milan to draw against Parma, especially after Milan scored. Instead, this is what happened, and Lazio had a really big chance to close the gap playing against Chievo. Team who was relegated, a team that simply this season was rubbish, and instead Lazio play so slow. It looks like they didn't care. It looks like Chievo was the team fighting for the Champions League, and Lazio was the team relegated. It was really annoying to see them not playing, not trying really to win this match. You said about Milinkovic-Savic. I could add that again, Badel was so slow. Again, he played so badly. Inzaghi gave another chance to Durmisi. I can understand because Lulic seemed really tired in the last couple of matches. So you have a big opportunity. And again, Durmisi was rubbish. Luis Alberto was very nervous. I didn't think he did nothing yesterday. So it's difficult because you cannot say, okay, these two players played badly. No, all the team played really rubbish yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there is this kind of timidness about this team, I think. And there are very few kind of warriors in this team. There are very few players, I think, that actually you can say every time they go on the pitch they're gonna bleed for the cause. And this is the problem, is that you want, as a fan, to believe that the players you're watching who represent your team care about everything as much as you do. And as a Lazio fan in the last couple of seasons, there's been nothing really that's been more important than this finally getting into the Champions League after so long. And it's just hard to believe when you watch a performance like that this team does care as much as we do, because some of the performances have just been subpar, and considering we know a lot of these players have a quality that's way above what they're showing on the pitch week in, week out at the moment. I mean, we're still there. This is the ridiculous thing about this year's Champions League race, is that I've said it a few times now, but you don't need to be good to actually finish in the Champions League this year, because all these teams are just struggling with massive consistency problems, and it's just such a shame that these two seasons went this way around, because if the Lazio of last season had been involved in this Champions League race, I've no doubt that they would have qualified, but that's the way it is. And I think we all want to see a big reaction to this in the Coppa Italia on Wednesday.
Yeah, Alistair, because as you were saying, the funny thing is Milan is only 4 points ahead of Lazio. It's true that they are 5 matches missing, but seeing how Lazio played in the last couple of matches, I cannot see happening that Lazio, close the gap after how they played. And one thing, Alistair, very important, I was thinking is, after the match against Inter at San Siro, Lazio was 4th with a big advantage. They had one match on hand and they had to play against Spal, Sassuolo, Milan and then Chievo. They had really 3 easy matches plus the Udinese one. And instead, after that, we lost against Spal away, we drew last second against Sassuolo, we lost against Milan and we lost against Chievo. 4 matches that have become fundamental because of the situation in the rank, in the table. And Lazio was simply embarrassing in these 4 matches. I think it's not physical, it's really mentally. And it's not that you can blame Durmisi or Patrick on that. I think even the leaders of last year, like Milinkovic-Savic, Luis Alberto, Ciro Immobile, they are not performing as well in these important matches. So it's not only the bench that is not good enough, it's even the starters that are not playing anymore at the level everybody was expecting them to play.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone. I mean, it's very hard to actually think of a player in this team who's improved this year. Most of our conversations have been about, when's Immobile going to rediscover his form? When's Milinkovic and Alberto going to return to the level they were at last season? That's what we need to happen in order to stand a chance here. It's just been a really strange season. I think that the reason so many people are so upset about this game, I think, in my opinion anyway, goes a bit beyond the fact that it's losing to Chievo being bottom of the league, the Champions League. All of those things are obviously infuriating. But also, I just think the whole performance, the game, the result, everything just represented all the problems of this Lazio team this season. It's the underperforming individuals, it's the lack of squad depth, or the underperforming squad players when there's a rotated team. It's this mental fragility. And also, the other thing I wanted to pick up on was, I think there's also a physical fragility. There are certain things that annoy me, like I don't think there's enough aggression in this team. But also, I just think someone asked on the podcast a couple of weeks ago about if there's a concerned with the team's fitness because of conceding so many late goals. But at the time I said I didn't think that was so much the issue, but I'm starting to change my mind about that a bit because I just think they don't look physically capable of competing with with other teams when they've got so many games in the calendar. But most teams are having to deal with this amount of fixtures, and it's just it seems quite evident, like you say, by how slowly the players are moving around the pitch, and a lot of the idea, I think, of people thinking the players don't care that they're moving too slowly, that they're dragging their feet, is because they're not fit enough or they're not fresh enough. So that's been a concern for me from this as well, I think.
I don't know. I think that obviously the condition is not great at this part of the season, but I think big part of this is mentally. You know, if your mind is not focused, then your body will not perform as well as it did. Plus, if you take in consideration the Sassuolo match, Lazio scored in the last second, so I don't think it's a fit problem. But there's for sure an injury bug that came back this season after a couple of years that didn't bother Lazio. Radu again, he's on and off the pitch. Correa gets in and out. So there is this big problem. I don't find the question, but I remember Patrick Bowman complaining about Simone Inzaghi. He said that the fact that Lazio didn't perform as well, didn't look to have the right motivation, is certainly to blame Simone Inzaghi about this. But as Parolo, after the match, was the only one coming out and talk with the media and saying, we have to apologize to our fans because of our performance. We didn't play as we expected. Simone Inzaghi all week long talked about performing and how complicated this match was. But even though our manager touted about the situation, we didn't perform, so it's all our fault. So I think Parolo is right. I don't believe that Inzaghi didn't warm the team. I think it's all to blame the players. But I'm curious to hear who do you believe? What's your point on this?
Well, I think it was good to first of all hear Parolo speak so honestly about the game. Not that it really helped, but I think it says a lot what he did say about the fact that Inzaghi, one thing even his detractors should bear in mind, one thing he's undeniably done is being able to create a united group of players, and that shines through by the fact that Parolo was looking to defend him, I suppose, with those comments a bit. But, you know, Inzaghi's got a lot to answer for in this recent run as well. I think everyone does, though. I don't think it's fair or correct to suggest that this recent dip in form can entirely be laid at the feet of Simone Inzaghi. I think he's really been let down by his players. I would agree with Marco Parolo about that. And particularly when you see something like Milinkovic, what is he thinking? I mean, it's one of the most petulant red cards I've ever seen. To kick out at a player like that when you're midway through the first half. I mean, what can Simone Inzaghi do about that? I mean, you can maybe react to it better or coach this team defensively a bit better to not concede the goals in the stupid way they did, but you are still, at the end of the day, ending up with 10 men very early on because one of your players has done something really stupid. And I think that's just one example. I think he's been let down by a lot of his players who he really needs to be relying on this season. But like I say, I think there are plenty of things that he's done wrong as well. So I don't think it's as simple here as being able to point a finger of blame at any one player or any one coach. I think that everybody altogether has been underperforming recently.
Alistair, we got a lot of questions about the team next year. Patrick Bowman say, I feel there will be a whole new team next season. Same thing, other listener asking, they feel that the squad next year will be completely different. Someone asking Lotito to spend more money. Do you think this is the end of an era? Let's put it like that. play like Luis Alberto, Milinkovic-Savic, maybe even Ciro Immobile, do you think they're going to leave Lazio? Do you think Tare and Lotito are fed up for the performance they made this season after the great performance they had last year, and think about, revolutionize, changing completely the team next summer?
Well, my take on that is that it still depends on what happens between now and the end of the season, because I think the way that the transfer market will be dictated entirely depends on where we stand. Because if we're in the Champions League, it's not looking very likely, but it is still possible. The club will have greater means and, I suppose, greater expectations on what they're looking to achieve than if we finish 8th and don't get in any European competition whatsoever. I do think there's probably something to that in terms of, if a good offer comes in for Milinkovic-Savic this summer, having had the season he's had, I think that they'd be stupid to resist. It just depends what we consider a good offer for him now, because his value has obviously dropped since last summer, and it's just down to what they're willing to accept, I suppose. But I think that it could possibly be a bit of a changing of the guard. I think it's pretty obvious that this squad needs freshening up, that we need greater quality and depth in order to compete, and that we need a Vice Immobile, for God's sake. I mean, it's just incredible to have gone so far without having one. And Felipe Caicedo, to his credit, has been stepping up recently and doing a decent job. But like we've always said, he's not a player in the same mould, and he's not a player who we can rely upon. So, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that probably there should be, a big changeover, seeing the performance of the players. And I was thinking even about Luis Alberto. I was really disappointed yesterday because, again, he was playing against Chievo Verona, a team that conceded so many goals, and he didn't do nothing. But you can see how nervous he was, how much he talked with the ref. And at the end of the match, you already lost the match, and you go and complain with the ref again to get a red card. I mean, it's silly to get a red card when the match is over, and he's going to miss a very important match next Sunday against Sampdoria, who, could be a very important match for Lazio, not only for the Champions League, but even for the Europe League. So, yes, I think players like that, if an offer comes, maybe Lazio should start selling them. One, because I think Luis Alberto have proved to be a very good player, but a player that is not very good to cope with the pressure. And when you fight for the Champions League, you need players that are able to perform under pressure in big situations, and probably Luis Alberto is not the type of player. Kirkito said, I've been listening to rumors about Correa linked to Napoli. Would you sell him? Well, again, Correa is another player. I think Kirkito is right saying that he has big quality, but again, he hasn't proved it. He had played very well some matches, others have disappeared. So I think we know what we are getting from these players, and it's simply not enough to reach the Champions League. So I think that if you get a lot of money for this type of players, it's the right season to sell them. And on the other hand, you finally can give an opportunity to Pedro Neto, Bruno Jordão, and all the other youngsters Lazio have that, could be good players. We already know what we're getting from the others, so why don't we give a chance to the others now?
Well, I mean, I think that, for me, for Correa, I think he deserves a second season. I wouldn't sell him in the summer, because I think there certainly have been disappointments and frustrations with certain aspects of his game, his consistency, not scoring enough goals probably. But he's shown he's got enormous talent, and when he is at his best, he's almost unstoppable. So I think that my general take is that when players come from other leagues, and I know he was at Sampdoria before, but they might need a bit more time to settle and deserve a second season. So I'd like to see Correa stay at the club. I think that in terms of selling the big players, I would only really be satisfied with that if we we're gonna reinvest that money in known quality. Actually spend it on players who you get certain guarantees from. Because if you sell Luis Alberto for say 30 million euros or so, and just bring in another Valum Berisha, then the quality of this squad has gone down. And Lotito is very, as we know, intent on trying to find bargains all the time rather than investing in players he know can do the job. But we have made some really effective signings recently of guys we know are known quality, like Lucas Leiva, like Francesco Acerbi. And I think that's something the club really need to look at doing more of if they are going to improve the overall quality of this squad and make a real move for the Champions League. Yes, it's a nice idea giving more game time to Neto and Jordao and young players, but I don't think that's going to be the thing that turns this club from one just outside the top four into one that's getting there every year. I think we need experienced and quality players, and I think we need to spend money to actually get those.
Yes, but let's not forget that Pedro Neto wasn't a 1 million deal, right? Lazio spent a lot of money on them, so I believe they rate him very high. So again, for me, my point of view is let's try Pedro Neto and Bruno Jordao, because of all the players in the team, they are the only one we didn't see them, and we don't know what we're gonna get out. We know what Luis Alberto, Ciro Immobile are bringing to the team, and this year is simply not enough. With Correa, I agree with you. He had just one season, so probably he need another one to show everybody his talent. Again, if Napoli comes with a lot of money, I would be thinking about that, because I think in that position there are a lot of other players that can replace them. As we said millions of times, the big problem of Lazio at the moment is we don't have a real striker. And Caicedo, to be honest, is the top striker of the year, 2019. This tells you how Ciro Immobile is playing bad this year. And at the same time,
that tells you a lot.
yeah, it tells you that Caicedo probably is the only player compared to last year that have improved, but simply is not there to get Lazio to the Champions League spot. So Lazio for sure need to buy another striker. But let's give those two youngsters a chance. And obviously, if you're selling Immobile and Milinkovic-Savic, you will have a lot of money. Invest on players that, if they're young, they have to be considered top players. Otherwise, go with Lucas Leiva type of players. Let's not go on Marusic again. Let's not go on Durmisi, because they are showing that maybe they're not that bad, but they're not raising the level of the team. And we see that if you want to reach the Champions League, you have to raise the level of this team.
Yeah, and it's also not fair. I've said this time and again, but it's not fair on Inzaghi to tell him that top four is the objective and then not compete with your direct rivals for those positions. Because, there's at least 6 teams fighting for those 4 places, but this season there's 8 teams doing it. And it's unrealistic to say, Lazio have to be in the Champions League places when we've got Felipe Caicedo stepping up and Milan have spent, 60 million on Piontek and Paqueta in January. So, yeah. But on Caicedo, there's a question actually that I wanted to put to you from Steven Scarpula. Said, would you keep Caicedo as a plan B for next season? He's not Vice Immobile, but his goal scoring in little time in his second season has been a pleasant surprise.
It depends what's your target next season. If you want to reach the Champions League, then you probably have to find a better striker. If instead you're looking for the Europe League, or maybe you're looking, a year of translation, to a year where maybe you give a go to youngsters and you have Caicedo as plan B, then yeah, but I think Lazio have to fight every year to reach the Champions League at this moment. So, as we said, I don't think Caicedo is the right option.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally agree. I think in order to raise the quality of the squad, we have to trim guys like that from the squad because, like you say, they're not Champions League players.
And one thing, Alistair, is, don't know if you agree with me, instead of going and spend money with players like Durmisi or Marzic or I don't know, that, again, I'm not saying they're bad players. I simply think they're not raising the level of the team. Then why not give some more opportunity to youngsters that are considered, like Murja had to go to Spal to play regularly. I mean, I seen Badal yesterday playing rubbish. Do we really need to sign a 31 years old player, and while we have Cataldi that can play in that position, and we know, because he's shown many times, that Cataldi is a Lazio fan. Cataldi is someone that will give everything for Lazio, and the celebration when he scored the derby tells you a lot. Instead of Badel, that is not going to be a Lazio fan. Now, let's be honest. He's going to be a professional player. He's going to try his best. But you know that playing Cataldi is going to give you more than 100%. Am I right? Am I wrong? I think this is what Lazio have to... Let's save the money you spent for Durmisi and Marusic and maybe buy less players, but buy players that really make the difference. And the other spots, you fill them up with the Primavera players who maybe has the talent and they're Lazio fans, so they'll try to make up what they're missing with the talent with the fan.
Well, yeah, I don't think that's an approach to build a squad, though. It's obviously a bonus to have people who care about the cause, and passionate players like Cataldi are great and the fans love it, but that's not more important in order to actually achieve a goal like Champions League qualification over a season. That's not what's going to get you there. It's useful to have players in the squad who are like that, but I wouldn't say it's worth getting rid of all these players and just promoting our Primavera team with that in mind.
Not our Primavera team, but let's be honest. Now, do you think there's a big gap between Cataldi and Badel? No, I don't think so. This season I thought Cataldi played much better than Badel. But still, in the rankings of Simone Inzaghi, there's Leva, Badel, and then Cataldi.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Cataldi as well should be used more as a Mezzala. But since this kind of fantasy Lazio ideas come about, that's his chances in that position have become less and less as well. So, no, I think Cataldi should have been used more than he has this season, especially because, like you say, he's been impressive when he has played, and at times like this, I think you do need players who are going to give everything for the cause, because it doesn't appear that everyone is at the moment. Yeah, so it's tough, but I mean, we've ended up in such a weird position here. I mean, I just think this whole season is so strange now, because we can still easily, well, not easily, but we can still realistically end up with a Coppa Italia win and European football by the end of this season. It doesn't look like there's any chance of that happening at the moment until there's some miraculous turnaround in form. But that would be strange, because if that happens, you would have to say on paper that that's a more successful season than last year if you win a trophy and end up in Europe. But I don't know, it feels a long way away still.
Alistair, do you think, what would be your judgment of the season if Lazio wins the Coppa Italia? Would it be a positive season even if Lazio doesn't reach Champions League and qualifies for the Europe League?
Well, I think any trophy is obviously a big deal, and I think Inzaghi would love to win that trophy because he's had a Super Coppa so far, but I think he'd like to take a big one like that. But yeah, I think for me, it would be a bit of a devastating blow in terms of this team's progress to miss out on European qualification and not to be in Europe next year. So, yeah, I mean, obviously that the Coppa Italia comes with that, but it would be a bit I don't know. In my mind, to say it depends what position you end up in. Is what I'm essentially trying to say. I think if Lazio win the Coppa Italia but finish 8th, it would be quite hard to argue that it's been a successful season. But then it is a trophy. So yeah, I think the Coppa Italia is hugely important now, because not only are we already as far through it as we are, but we know that the opponents in the final will be either Atalanta or Fiorentina, and that's, although not an easy task, a much easier one than we've had in recent years against Juventus, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, my point is pretty much similar to yours. Obviously, winning a Coppa Italia is still a trophy, so it's really important for Lazio. But yeah, I thought the biggest target was reaching the Champions League. So it wouldn't be an amazing season, but still reaching the Europe League in the league and winning the Coppa Italia would be still a positive league. So the funny thing of this season is that we are now talking about an unbelievable defeat against Chievo, but still Lazio have everything on hand. There's only 4 points between Lazio and Milan that is actually in the 4th spot. So yeah, if Milan loses 2 matches and Lazio win all the other matches, then Lazio will get the 4th spot. But yeah, at the moment it's quite incredible. And the other incredible thing, Alistair, is that Roma is back in the fight. After the derby, after they lost against Spal, I thought that the season was over. Instead, fighting with a little bit of luck, etc. But they're there. They're above Lazio. And yes, this tells you that you don't need to be Juventus to reach a Champions League spot this year.
No, not at all. I mean, I think whoever Italy's 4th Champions League representative is, has a lot of work to do in the summer to make sure they don't embarrass themselves in that competition next year, because I don't think any of these teams are really Champions League quality as it stands. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, the one thing Ranieri's done with Roma, which Inzaghi's not managed to do with Lazio, is he's managed to tighten them up defensively recently. And even if they're not playing too well, and they really haven't been blowing anyone away with their performances, just the fact that you can keep things tight at the back and keep a few clean sheets is often enough to actually get you points. When I was out there game against Udinese recently, and they won that game 1-0, and it wasn't exactly a memorable performance, but they did just about enough, and it's 3 points on the board. And that's the thing that frustrated me again yesterday, is just seeing how open that team was at the back and how meek the defending was for those 2 goals. And that's a real issue. And I don't think Lazio can really hope to make an awful lot of progress until that's sorted out once and for all. I mean, we always do at this kind of when these kind of things happen. But again, we've had quite a few people asking us about changing to a back 4. So, do you want to talk about that again, or has nothing changed?
Again, I don't think it's a formation problem. It's not that with 4 defenders things will change back. And Inzaghi again switched to the 4-man defense in the second half yesterday. The problem is, you come back, you're 1 man down, but you're still in chance to winning the match. So I was hoping to see Lazio starting the second half, really pushing hard to try to score. Instead, Chievo scored twice in the start of the second half. This shows you how bad mentally Lazio was in this match, and against Chievo, who hardly scored. And again, there is a mistake of Marusic jumping way too ahead on the cross, allowing the Chievo defender attacker to control the ball, be in front of Strakosha and score. And another mistake in the second goal. So it's individual mistakes. And as we said already, against Udinese, Lulic gave a free penalty to Udinese. The week before was Patrick. So it's always different players making different mistakes, and it's simply not acceptable. And I really don't believe that it's Inzaghi to blame for these individual errors, or playing with 4 defenders, 3 defenders, 5 defenders. It's simply the lack of concentration, and it's not acceptable in match so important. The Lazio players have this lack of concentration. I think Parolo is right. they become so convinced that they are good players, but without showing it, without playing at that level. And this is what you get when you think you're good and you're not playing concentrate.
Well, actually, yeah, on that note, I was wanting to pick you up on. I saw Patrick Bowman sent us a question about Parolo's comments, talking about that, saying that, the players have had a lack of humility. And he says this is totally Inzaghi's fault. Do you agree? Of course, it's the players who have the wrong mental approach, but it's the coach's job to make sure the players go into the game with the right mindset, which I think is quite an interesting point. So what do you think of that? I mean, can you blame Inzaghi for the mentality of this team? Is it that simple?
No, I don't think so. If you are a winner, you are a winner. If you're a loser, even if you have, I don't know, the biggest motivator, you cannot become a winner. And as Parolo said, Inzaghi warned them all week long about this match, how important this match was, how tricky this match was. At the end of the day, though, Inzaghi cannot play. He can put the players and tell them to play in a certain way. And I think this shows you how some of the players are simply not good enough mentally, more than I think Lazio have good quality players, but mentally they're not at the level for the Champions League. And in this case, I don't blame Durmisi or Patrick. I blame key players of Lazio, like Luis Alberto, like Correa, like Ciro Immobile, like Milinkovic-Savic that did. And I think that is simply unbelievable. That red card was embarrassing. I think I never saw nothing like that in my whole life. So those are the leaders, and if the leaders of the team play like that in a so important match, then what can you expect from Durmisi and Patrick, etc.? So I think this is the problem. And the fact, for example, that the only time Lazio reached the Champions League was when they had Ledesma, they had Miro Klose, players with not only talent but winning mentality. Let's think of how often Miro Klose was scoring in the derby, and then think about Ciro Immobile, how often he scores in the derby. You see that there's a big difference there, because Miro Klose was old but still was a great player, not only because he had skills but because of his way he played, focus, really concentrate, and the winning mentality that I think a lot of Lazio players don't have.
Yeah. I mean, something that I was thinking about was that the thing that concerns me a lot about this as well is that, there are some you get teams and players and so on in all sorts of different sports who kind of they have a kind of atmosphere around them or a reputation around them for choking after a while. And, in the Premier League, people used to at least always talk about Spurs in particular being Spursy when, basically bottling it at crucial moments. And I think that Lazio are on track to getting that reputation if they don't already. And I think that is a really hard thing to shake off once people start saying it. When people start seeing results like this and say classic Lazio and make all these kind of comments, then it almost makes the pressure even higher when it comes to these crucial games and these big games, because the players will be aware of the fact that historically they have struggled to actually, assert themselves in moments of high pressure. And it's almost, self-perpetuating. It can be a real problem for teams and players. So that does worry me a bit. I don't want Lazio to end up with a reputation as bottlers, but that's the way things are going at the moment. And it's not an easy thing to change. And I think you've struck on a really good point there. I think that the easiest way of changing that is by probably changing the personnel and having more guys in that dressing room and in that playing squad who have that winning mentality and who can try and help and share that. And I'm sure Inzaghi could do more to try and give that to the players and to help them out. But when it comes down to it, he's not out on the pitch with them. He tries to be because he's basically on the pitch most of the game. But, you do need guys on the pitch who are going to drag that team forward. And we don't have too many of them. I think Francesco Acerbi is very good at that, but we don't have players like that throughout the team. So perhaps that's something they need to look at really bringing in a bit more.
I mean, Lazio have to bring players who have won already, who have the experience, who have played important matches that can make a difference in the season. That's why I'm talking about Miro Klose. If you check Lazio's team, there's not a player who have won something. Ciro Immobile have won nothing. Well, he won with Lazio, but it's a Supercoppa Italiana. Same thing, Luis Alberto. There's not a player in Lazio team who have a winning experience. That's why I'm referring to Miro Klose. He had won different levels, so you need those type of players. If we consider the experienced players at Lazio, we are talking about Stefan Radu and Marco Parolo. Marco Parolo is 34 years old, and in his career he hasn't won nothing, and he's the leader. So we need those type of players who. Let's think Juventus. Juventus went and fetched Cristiano Ronaldo because he had the winning experience of the Champions League. And if you see who was scoring in the important matches, Cristiano Ronaldo, not Dybala, not other players. Cristiano Ronaldo. That's the quality players, that have quality and have the experience to win those, how to perform in those important matches. We have quality. We have Luis Alberto that it's a magician, we say, but go and see his performance in the big matches. He often disappeared in those type of matches, and yesterday it was against Chievo, not Juventus defense, and he was unable to do nothing. Why? Because he was scared, he was nervous, because he wasn't able to cope with the pressure. He wasn't used to play those type of matches that are really important and against teams that you should win again. So that's what I'm saying. Lazio should try this summer and go and play and go and buy those type of players who have the winning experience, who won already, who maybe have reached a Champions League and know what they have to do to reach there. That's my point. Otherwise, let's go and play Pedro Neto and the youngster because they don't have experience. Maybe they're so good they don't need to have experience instead of Durmisi or Berisha.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's more or less what I was saying at the start of the show about I think the club does need to look to buy these kind of players in the summer, and obviously that'll come at a cost. That'll cost more to bring in players of that quality, but that to me is the only way that they're gonna get over this kind of obstacle between the club and the Champions League once and for all, and sort it out. I mean, it's unbelievable how close this club has got to the Champions League since we were last in it without making it, and missing out narrowly to Udinese, and obviously losing to Leverkusen in a playoff, and then the Inter game last year. And so I think that surely the lesson needs to be learned at some point, and we know that the club is in a healthy financial position, but the way, the thing that Lotito needs to recognise is that obviously he loves the club being in a healthy financial position, but the best way of bringing in big money to this club is by getting it to the Champions League, and sometimes you've got to open your checkbook to make that happen. So I think we are kind of talking about this result, like I said right at the start, as an example of everything that's bad with the club. But I think a lot of these conversations might we might change our mind a little bit by the end of the season, depending on what happens. So, it's just really hard to imagine at this stage that things are going to turn on their head, and the club's suddenly going to start playing in the same way they did last season. But here's hoping.
and Alistair, I think the reason why Lazio is still in this fight is because Milan as well lack of those players that have that winning experience. And if you see, again, Lazio's there because Milan had a great chance against Parma, who had nothing to ask for from the league, and still was able to stop Milan. And Milan against Inter in the derby had a big chance, to increase the gap, and instead they lost. So I think Lazio is still in the fight, not because Lazio playing better, it's because the other team has pretty much all the same problem. And this is why I see Roma a little bit favourite, because Roma had those players that, like Dzeko, who have won with Manchester City. They have experienced players that have already won. They're not playing great football, as you were saying, but it's the mentality, the winning experience that can really make a difference in this situation. And that's why Roma suddenly, even without playing well, are starting winning, because they have those type of players. Obviously, if you want to buy Dzeko, you have to pay him, because he comes from a big team who have won. But it depends what you want to reach. Champions League, then you have to spend money for getting those players that have the winning mentality.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there has been a bit of a case of, the club almost regarding itself as being the underdogs and being the targets, and the media's against us, the world's against us. Actually, I think they just need to start, taking a bit more pride in themselves and thinking of themselves as being a big club and being on the same level as those other teams. Because on the pitch they have been. So, yeah, it's quite hard to tell what's going to happen in the next few weeks. But the first thing is Wednesday and the Coppa Italia semi-final. And again, I said this before the last time we played Milan in Serie A, that in a way, a game like this is almost ideal, because it's a great opportunity to cast all this negativity to the side with a win and a good performance. But that, obviously didn't happen last time. So my confidence in that happening is a lot lower than it was, I think.
And the thing incredible is that even after Lazio playing so bad, I think they still have the chance to beat Milan, because even Milan is not playing great. And I hope really we see a reaction of the players after this terrible performance. I'm too optimistic, or do you feel the same?
Well, I don't think it's too optimistic to think we'll see a reaction, because there has to be something, I mean, it cannot get any worse than Saturday, so that's something. I agree that Milan haven't impressed me much this season, very rarely. But at the same time, Gattuso's got the edge. Gattuso's never lost to Inzaghi in, I think, 5 or 6 meetings now. And Milan at home to Lazio have an astonishingly good record. And I know it's all just history, but it does build up. And I'm not seeing an awful lot of evidence in front of me to put some money on a Lazio win, but you always have to have some sort of positivity, some sort of hope, or else what's the point? So, I'm really hoping we suddenly see a big performance and a big reaction, and the team from the game against Inter, or the team from the Rome derby. And that's the frustrating thing about this team, really, is that we know they're capable of these performances. We know they're capable of better than they're giving, and that's what makes it much harder to take when results like this happen.
Or maybe they are very qualitative players, but they're not able to perform under pressure like they're showing this season.
Well, yeah, but then again, the Rome derby was a high-pressure situation, and as was the game against Inter, because of what it meant for the Champions League race. So it's not always been that clear-cut, but there's like I said before, and like you said at the very start of the show, there's no excuse. It's unforgivable to lose at home to Chievo a game like this is astonishing, to be honest. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. We gotta keep the faith, keep believing.
Alistair, before we wrap it up, I think we have to give an update on the Primavera because Lazio won, but as Pescara won again, Lazio will have to go through the playoff. So the first goal of the season for Lazio Primavera was qualifying for the Serie A, but they failed, so they have to pass to the playoff. Now, playoff, everything can happen. So I think we can say it's a little bit of a delusion, thinking how Lazio a couple of years ago was one of the best team in the Primavera, and now they got relegated and they didn't get promoted immediately. So Lazio will play the quarterfinals the 4th of May against Verona. So not a very easy team to fight. And then, if I'm not right, it should be the winner of Lazio Verona against the winner of Venezia and Lecce. And then the final, and I think the most dangerous team could be Ascoli. So, again, it's not really impossible, but you would expect Lazio to win this group and get promoted immediately instead of going through the playoff. A little bit of delusion here, Alistair. I don't know if you agree.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, last season was a total disaster. And like you say, I mean, obviously the Primavera, the youth teams function a bit differently because over the years the players grow up and go elsewhere, and so you're having to constantly bring through a next generation. But even so, that was always one of the biggest strengths of this club in recent years, especially under Inzaghi, was what they were achieving at youth team level and how many of those players were then coming through to the senior team. So, yeah, it's a bit disappointing, if I'm honest. I think we would have liked to see them bounce straight back up, and to be honest, it was kind of an expectation, really, as well. But it's still a possibility. So, yeah, I think it is quite an important thing. I don't think it'll be too easy for the club to attract particularly exciting young talent if they can't even offer them a place in the best youth league in Italy, which seems a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this brings me to the other point. Be careful when we rate youngster. Everybody's talking about Juan Capani, but he's playing in Serie B of Primavera and it's not able to bring Lazio to win the league. So maybe he's good, maybe he's not. I think it's too early to talk about him in the first team because he still have to prove a lot in the Primavera. Said this again, thank you very much, Alistair Mackenzie, and thanks everybody for listening. Again, we apologize for the little internet issue we had before. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, and if you want to support the podcast, then you can subscribe to our Patreon page, patreon.com/Lazio Lounge. Membership starts from $2. Thank you, Alistair, and we're going to talk about after the semi-final of Coppa Italia, Milan-Lazio. Thanks, Alistair.
Cheers.